All right, I think we're officially started. So welcome to the September 9th School Board Budget Finance Subcommittee. And I think the big thing to start us off is we're going to hear something about solar energy today.
Sure. Yeah, go here. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, speak with you about the solar energy aspect of this project, on which we've been working with the district and with Ron and his team at LaValle Brensinger for more than a year. My company, Revision Energy, has of course worked with the school district before, as well as the town of Durham, on several solar projects. All of those completed through what we call the Power Purchase Agreement, PPA contracts, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Revision, so that led to us being retained, as I mentioned, back in July of last year, to work from the beginning with the design team to put solar on this project. And I think I can say that we've had great communication between Revision Energy and Ron and his team and the folks at, for example, RBI, the company that's going to be providing the carport structure, and other folks, the general contractor, electrical subcontractor. So far, we've actually billed the district for about $5,500 worth of $10,000 for design services that was originally authorized. And bottom line, we're really pleased and honored to be part of this project that's really going to distinguish Oyster River School District as a leader in New Hampshire and in the region for its goal to build a net zero school here in Durham. Since this is, of course, a public meeting being broadcast, and since some people may be sort of tuning into this aspect of the project or seeing what's going on for the first time with solar, I just want to quickly say something about Revision Energy. We're a 17-year-old company, mission-driven. Our mission is to, as it said, lead Northern New England's transition to a clean energy economy. We were founded way back in 2003 up in Maine, literally two guys in a garage, and since then have expanded to today have 5 offices in 3 states: Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. Got over 275 employee owners. We've installed more than 9,000 clean energy systems across the region, most of those solar PV systems. And we're rated the #1 rooftop solar installer in New England. Here's just sort of a summary of what we've accomplished in our 17-year life as a company. Here's a real quick rundown of some of the projects that we've completed first just in the Seacoast region, of course, here at Oyster River, and then just up the road in Dover. Also Nottingham, as you can see, Phillips Exeter Academy. That was one of our largest rooftop installations at the time. Now that's several years old. Here's some others in the Seacoast. Here's some other projects for school districts that we have completed or are working on. 2 schools over in Nashua currently under development. Interlakes High School way back in 2016, and Berryfield School, and of course we've done others I don't even have on the list here. Proctor Academy, Tilton, We've done a huge amount of work up at Dartmouth College. They keep asking us back to do more. We're developing more for them as I speak. This was another large public sector project that exceeded, Phillips Exeter. And then this one, sort of our crown jewel for the moment in the public sector, school sector in New Hampshire. Dover's brand new high school, almost a megawatt of solar on that roof. And then this one close to home, in case people hadn't seen this or were aware of this project that we did for the town several years ago. Why is there all this solar energy going up across the region? Why has Revision Energy had this kind of growth as a company? Because as electricity from the grid has gotten, consistently higher over the last several decades, the cost of actually putting solar on buildings and on the ground has been coming down, down, down. So this project, in fact, benefits from that in a way that I'll mention in a few minutes. And here's a picture of what we've got so far at this moment for the new middle school. We're putting solar panels just about everywhere we can on the roof of the building, and then going to potentially cover a carport with solar. This picture's probably not quite to scale. I think to scale the carport's a little bit bigger than that. This one maybe does a little bit better job, and this one also makes note of the fact that we have an area on the roof of the building that's being reserved and used for solar thermal collectors. But a closer view of the carport. As you can see from the numbers being presented here, well, it doesn't actually say so, but we're ending up with a little bit more solar that would be on the carport than fits on the roof of the building. The split between the split's about 55%, 45, 55, 45. 45% of it on the roof of the building, and 55% would go on the carport. Carport, as you can see, is just 100% covered, whereas on the roof of a building, you've got to leave clearances from the edge, walkways, access points for rooftop equipment, things like that. So, and the third bullet is what I was referring to a moment ago when I said sort of this project benefiting from the continuing advances in technology and cost. For most of the past year, in our original design for this project, we were specifying a 375 watt solar panel, because that was the largest panel that we were buying in bulk, that was at a price that was the most cost effective. That was sort of our bread and butter panel for rooftop and ground mount installations. But just in the last several months, the availability and the price point of a 440 watt panel has gotten to the point where we thought it made sense to substitute, to upgrade, if you will. And it's a substantial upgrade in terms of production. It's 17% more output from that panel. So from the same space, you get 17% more power and energy. So that helped us get a much higher number, up to that 600 and almost 685,000 kilowatt hours, and hopefully very, very close to the goal. So the power purchase agreement, how is this solar going to come to be on the roof of the new middle school? Well, all along, most of the time, we've been thinking that the most likely, the most viable vehicle for doing so would be through the use of this power purchase agreement. And as I said, that's really the standard vehicle for procurement of solar in the public sector, because there are substantial tax advantages available for solar equipment purchases. But of course, a school district, a town, any nonprofit organization like the Children's Museum, say, doesn't pay taxes, so they can't benefit directly from those federal tax benefits. So the PPA is a way that the customer, the host, if you will, can benefit indirectly. You use this vehicle, which is as it shows there on the slide, a three-party arrangement where you, Oyster River School District, the middle school, would serve as the host, obviously, of the array. The arrays are going to go on the roof of the building and the carport. And you will sign the power purchase agreement, agree to purchase all the electricity that comes from that array. And of course, a third-party investor is going to provide the capital, all the money up front to build the array. So that's how solar happens, with no capital outlay at first by the town or the school district. However, a significant feature of the power purchase agreement is that there is an option, never the obligation, but an option for the school district to buy the array at a significant discount after 5 years. The 5-year threshold is a function of IRS rules that pertain to the tax credits. So the investor, having taken the tax credits, must hold the investment for 5 years. So there's actually a regime set up. It's part of the PPA that the district will have the option to purchase the array at year 6 at a significant discount. But as I said, it's not an obligation, it's an option. The district, any host, may choose to stay on the power purchase agreement to its term. However, the most, as you'll see in a moment, the most significant, the way to the largest, by far, the largest savings for the school district, for the host, are to exercise that buyout option. Become the owner of the array, and then you reap the benefits of the energy for the rest of its life. So here's just a sort of more formal explication of what the structure is of a solar PPA in three-party arrangement. And obviously I didn't talk a lot about it in the last slide, but the third party, of course, is someone who designs and builds the array, and that's us, Revision Energy. That's where we specialize. You know, and that's how we, frankly, that's how we make our money. That's what we do, is we design and build solar. We don't make money from financing. We don't, that's a, you know, third party, but this is what we do. We design and build. And frankly, investors are confident to put up their money and invest in a solar array that'll be built, that was designed and that will be built and managed by a solar company with a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. So here is the sort of one-page summary of the financials on the PPA, and my colleague Dan Clapp is going to hand out paper version. I probably should have introduced myself at the beginning for the audience, Ned Reynolds, and that's my colleague Dan, who is one of our founders of Revision Energy, founding partners, and also happens to be a Madbury resident and a constituent of the district. His kids are gonna go to this school, so near and dear to his heart. So, as I mentioned, what we've got for you is combined 638 kilowatts of solar between the two roofs. Going to produce nearly 685,000 kilowatt hours every year. And we are going to be able to offer, or the investor will be able to offer to the district all the electricity from that array for 9.4 cents a kilowatt hour. That's called out in the middle of the PPA financial summary section. That's for the year one PPA rate, 9.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And for comparison, of course, a big part of what we do always when designing solar arrays, whether we're selling to a commercial client or whether we're putting together a project like this, three-party arrangement partnership for a public sector, is we're analyzing utility costs, utility rates, and, while we'd love people to love solar and just do it for that reason, we know that people will only purchase solar if we can deliver solar electricity for less than utility rates. And so, right up to the present, I've been updating the spreadsheet. Utility rates, you're on the Eversource, it's called their GV rate, large commercial institutional rate, changes monthly. And so, I've gone back and updated the Eversource rates for comparison last 12 months, right up to including September's rate, between the charge for energy plus distribution, transmission, system benefits charge, something called a stranded cost charge. These are all the sort of stacked up charges on your electric bill. The cost of those here for the Oyster River School District adds up to over 10 cents for every kilowatt hour that you get delivered from the grid. So when you put solar on a building, or in this case, next to a building, attached to a building, and you can use a substantial portion of that energy produced by the solar right away, right in the building. That's called behind the meter. You avoid that I call it fully loaded utility rate of over 10 cents. So the 9.4 cents will deliver, some savings. It's modest savings in the early years because, of course, someone else is putting up the money to put the array there. You'll realize, it's an average of about, as you can see in the lower left section, it's an average of about $3,300 a year through the first 5 years. Then, as I said before, you have that buyout option. The early buyout price is back there in the second section. Early buyout price, $661,468. And then that would have, I'm going to jump to the next slide, where it sort of graph the savings path. That would have about a 9-year payback. So by year 14 or so, you would have that array completely paid off by reaping, annually all the solar electricity, displacing utility electricity. You'd be saving substantial amounts every year. Hit that payback point at about year 14, and then after that, all the savings is, all that solar electricity is gravy, just accruing to you. For comparison, there's as you can see, the light blue line is the option of staying on the PPA through it for its long term. But just switching back here, you can see that the savings for exercising the buyout option, the 25-year savings are over $1 million, and the stay on the PPA for the 25 years is only $210,000. So it's just about, it's more than almost 5 times the savings for exercising the buyout. Another way to look at the comparison between staying on the grid or going solar, exercising the PPA, or staying on the PPA to term is to look at it as in this levelized cost of energy way. This is basically adding up all the electricity, cost of all the electricity produced over 40 years, which is the expected life of the system, and dividing by the total cost. And as you can see, the PPA with the 6-year buyout, year 6 buyout, easily undercuts, even if you thought utility prices weren't going to go up at all. That would be 9.6 cents, but of course, utility prices, as I showed in the earlier slide, have consistently gone up a little bit over 3% a year is the number for the last 3 decades. So we think clearly shows that solar is by far the cheapest energy over the long haul. This obviously hard to see as a slide, but we've handed out the more detailed savings, financial schedule. And this being the Finance Committee, I certainly wanted to bring that here, and we might get into that in the questions and answers. So for comparison, I was told, certainly be prepared to discuss what we call the turnkey purchase option. Act as if you are, even though you're a nonprofit town, and you can't take advantage of the tax benefits, one option would still be to buy it. You could buy it. You just wouldn't get those tax advantages. So what would that look like? Well, here are the numbers.
Thanks.
You can see that you bought it outright. You certainly would experience the owning it. You would directly experience all the full value of the electricity production and the renewable energy credits, over $70,000 a year. But since you sort of paid full price without the benefit of the tax credit, it would take you 14 years to pay it off. The 25-year net savings are not all that different. I mean, they're $927,000, but they're still about $100,000 short of the 25-year savings in the PPA option. Again, here's what that looks like, graphed. I included this, obviously, where you probably don't have $1.1 million in the drawer, so you'd likely finance that. As a school district, you get pretty low interest rates. I use 3% here, so you could certainly bond it for 20 years at 3%. And that is almost cash flow, neutral for the first 20 years. It actually works out, as you'll see on the detailed. I provided the detailed schedule for this as well. It's a little bit cash negative for about 5 years, and then it's a little bit more cash positive for about the next 15. But it's still, and then the savings go up rapidly. But as I said, it still wouldn't, even lifetime savings wouldn't quite equal the PPA option. You just can't really recover from passing up on, 400,000 something in tax credits that the tax-paying investor can, So that's the reason for the PPA. Again, levelized cost of energy, still low, 5.1 cents. But under the PPA, it was 4.7, so it's not quite as good. So here you also have this. So in summary, kind of what I've been saying here. Obviously, we use the same assumptions in both, but the PPA really works out to be the better option. So now what next? Of course, we know that we'll have a discussion here tonight, and then we'll have this presentation and further discussion next week with this full board. But we hope that if you like this, what you'll be willing to do is sign this, negotiate and sign the PPA so that we can safe harbor this project. So here I have to explain what's all that about. One of the significant federal tax credits is called the investment tax credit, the ITC, which you can see abbreviated in a couple of places there. That is one of the two aspects of the tax benefits. The other one is accelerated, it's actually bonus depreciation 1 year that solar equipment is eligible for. But the investment tax credit is a straightforward tax credit that's been in legislation for a couple of decades. Straight off the top, the investor gets to write off that percentage as a tax credit. That credit has been 30% for much of its life. It is now, in 2020, it is in the second year of a legislated sunset period. Congress, a couple of years ago, decided not going to have that forever. It was 30% last year. It is 26% in this year, 2020. It's scheduled to go to 22% next year, and the year after that, go to 10%. So safe harboring, as you might imagine, is a way in which the investor can commit, whoever builds a solar project, so this applies to homeowners as well, anybody's watching. Investor, whoever's going to buy a solar project, can commit a small fraction of the money, 10%, to the project in 2020. Need a signed contract that says that project's going to be built. And then procuring and receiving and taking title to 10% of the equipment earns that project in the eyes of the IRS safe harbor status in 2020. So the 26% rate is obviously a factor in the financial model that allows the investor to offer the PPA rate that they offer. So every number you're seeing here tonight is predicated on the investor receiving 26% investment tax credit. So the offering you the 9.4 cents PPA rate. So we hope that we can go through this, accomplish these steps and secure this project, the 2020 tax status. And then we'll do our part by the end of the year. As I said, which is to procure that equipment, transfer title to the investor, and then we'll store that equipment and we'll hold it until you're ready in 2021, hopefully, to when the building is ready. Whenever Ron and his team say, yeah, it's ready for putting solar on the building or the carport, whatever comes first, we'll get to it. So that's what I've got for you tonight, and happy to entertain questions, discussion.
Questions?
Oh, I got a bunch of questions.
Okay, well, I figured you would.
Do we have any performance data on the service building? How it's compared to what the projections were? Because we're, 3 or 4 years into that at this point.
Yeah, I do, actually. I have that. Sabrina does that. I should have sent that. I can ask her to update it. She did it a while ago.
Okay, yeah,
I'll send her an email right now.
Plus the other one, you can get it from the town of Durham, our solar array that, how long have we had the one for Durham?
For the town? That was on the library,
The
right?
gravel pit out, the Lee gravel pit.
The town has owned the rooftop arrays for about 8 years. Gravel pit has been,
Yeah, I know we're beginning to talk about the 6-year buyout, all right? So we should have data anyway from the town, right?
we do. There's one thing to note is trees were never cut on 2 sites. So more slightly underperforming, they have since been cut. So this year we should be matching. Should have been.
I would just add that when Sue and I looked at the maintenance garage, the savings at that point were pretty significant. So we'll get that right to you.
And then you talked about how the best value is when you're consuming the energy behind the meter. What fraction of the year is all of the energy being consumed behind the meter versus the meter running backwards, negative bill?
Right. Good question. Well, I mean, in particular, with this building, which doesn't exist yet, we're really just making an educated guess. The model, the numbers that you're seeing, the assumption is that only 60% of the energy is being used behind the meter, and 40% is being net metered. So that's me making a pretty conservative assumption. The energy is worth less when it's net metered. You know, you get, in this case, it's a large array, so you get only the default energy rate that the utility is offering at that time.
What would that rate be
made a
today?
conservative, guess that it would be 40%.
Yeah, and I think that's probably 40% seems, like you said, I think that's conservative. This is a better situation for solar than a residential environment in a lot of cases because we're using all the energy during the day when the building's occupied.
Yeah.
Instead of, well, except for right now where everybody's home, but.
And of course, it is true that schools are less occupied over the summer than they are year-round, but I guess it's also true that schools these days are being used more and more into the summer months. You know, they're certainly not totally unoccupied.
Yeah, I would anticipate this building being used in the summertime, bringing our programs to it because it'll
A lot of summer
climate
programs,
controlled.
of athletics. Yeah, so, yeah, I thought, I think 40% was a pretty,
Yeah, and Jim was asking what the default rate is when we are having net sale? Or
yeah, so actually I have, right here, I thought I might get questions about this, so I brought a snapshot of my spreadsheet. So the bottom line, highlighted, that first column, the average of the last 12 months monthly default rate, 8.326 cents. And of course, this building won't be, there'll be 2 more rate changes from Eversource. So we're projecting, a year out, but we're using the best data, the only data we have.
And is this some fraction of the market rate, or how is this? Because this isn't a regulated. This isn't a PUC regulated number, is it?
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, yeah. This is Eversource's, upper left, this is Eversource's rate GV. So you're
since we're
on.
Streaming, would you mind explaining behind the meter and so forth so that people understand what we're asking?
Oh, sure. So, if we're generating energy within the middle school site, and we're consuming that within the middle school, Eversource doesn't even know that usage ever happened. They never see it. It doesn't come in. It doesn't go out.
Correct.
We use it right away.
That's when you save that on the lower right, far corner right. That's when you save 10.48 cents.
Yeah. So
when you use it behind the meter.
right. And so we're not paying Eversource for energy, and we're not paying Eversource for distribution.
Right.
When we are generating more energy at the middle school site than we're using,
Yeah.
the Eversource meter is running backwards, but they're not giving us as much, they're not paying us as much for that energy as we pay them when we're having energy coming into the building from Eversource.
That's right.
And that's what we're talking about, is the difference between what it costs us to buy energy from Eversource and what they pay us when we push energy back into the grid.
Right. And
So
so when
simplify, we want to
when
use as much of the energy that we generate locally and not try to sell anything.
You actually, you start to shoot yourself in the foot if you generate too much because there's nowhere for it to go at an economical rate. Yeah.
Right. That's when you put it on the grid, you get 8.3
Right.
according to that. And then again, that's an average of 12 months.
Why has it gone down so much over the last 2 years?
Well, yeah, it's a phenomenon of a few factors. One factor is that an increasing, of course, every utility now, all in New Hampshire, they're just distribution utilities. They're buying electricity off the New England grid. So an increasing fraction of the electricity available on the grid is being generated burning natural gas in power plants, and that's, everybody knows natural gas being cheaper and plentiful because of fracking. So that's one factor. Another factor, frankly, is in the rates themselves. Eversource and Unitil and all the regulated utilities, they're just poles and wires companies now. And so really, they're distribution and transmission companies, really distribution. And so they're increasingly shifting their rate base to be more competitive with supply, because a lot of times people are going out for competitive supply and they're losing market there, they're losing transaction. So they're shifting more of their rate base to the distribution and transmission. And they're just trying to push it down. You know, that's, New England's been long, and New York, the Northeast is famous for sort of high utility costs, and the businesses complain about it endlessly, and everybody does, and so they're trying to bring it down when they can. You know,
If that continues to go down, is there an opportunity to renegotiate the PPA rate?
ooh, well, somebody made a big capital investment based on a contract, but I want to go back to this slide. There have been, I think we are in a period now, this graph, because it's using EIA, National United States Department of Energy EIA data. It's through 2018, but everybody knows that we're kind of right now in a period where we're more like this. But they've happened before. There's been lulls in the rate of increase of utility rates, and we're in one now. But we, 30 years of history, we are confident that this too shall pass. Just like the stock market, rates may fall a little bit for a couple of years, but they go back up. I also want to point out that although this graph and the data show that the rate of utility increase over the past several decades has been 3.1%, the increase that we assume in our financial model is conservatively 2.5%. So when we quote you savings numbers, those savings are against an assumed utility rate increase of 2.5. And the PPA itself has a built-in rate of increase of only 2%. So our theory is to start below current utility rate, and escalate less than projected utility increase. So it's a financial model. You're getting someone else to put up $1.1 million to put a lot of equipment up, and that has to be based on certain assumptions, and we try to make them conservative, and beneficial to the customer. But
the answer, I guess, is that the school district has the ability or has the option to buy.
Microphone.
Oh,
School. The school district will have the opportunity to buy starting in year 6 if the rate ever did inverse there and not be favorable. But again, we are just making conservative assumptions. One change that could be made is, right now we're fixing the rate for 2 years and then have an escalator on the PPA. We could extend that, but if you extend that, then the PPA rate could go up in the model. So we just got to balance those factors.
right. So, the challenge is, assuming that we were to look at a buyout after 5 years, we're not talking about 30 years of energy cost increases. We're talking about the difference over the next 5 years, and we're starting off we're in this dip. So Yeah, it's a kind of a guessing game as to how fast they're going to recover or increase.
Correct. I think we're showing, what, about 16,000 in savings over those. So those savings, again, it's based on assumptions and it could be eroded.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly right. And that's why we're coming in with conservative assumptions on the percentage to be consumed behind the meter. And so we're trying to present, a sound model
Right.
with sound assumptions, but just like that, nothing's fixed, just like the stock market.
Great. Okay. It looks like the
I just want to repeat one
sure.
more thing Dan said, but I think it went quickly. Another part of our conservatism is that we don't escalate the PPA starting in year 2. We escalate the PPA starting in year 3. So that's sort of another, right? We're below to start. It only escalates at 2% a year, and the escalation doesn't start till year 3. So that's sort of 3 ways in where we try to be conservative and be sure that you're going to have, for a 5-year PPA, that you're going to still have a rate that's going to be below utility.
Right. Okay. In the turnkey model, it looks like the RECs go away after 10 years. Is that part of the current regulatory environment? Or?
Oh, right, the RECs. Yes, actually, they don't show up on the PPA rate, but they do on the turnkey. But because on the PPA they're owned by the investor, but if you buy it, they'll be there in years 6 through 10. That's another way in which we're actually conservative. We assume that they'll only be there for 10 years because that's just a long way. RECs are entirely a creation of policy. They exist because the state has a requirement that the utilities get a certain fraction of their electricity from renewable energy, and RECs are the sort of the currency for how that is verified, and they trade the rights and the attributes. We're also conservative in that we assume a declining value of RECs over time, which may not. We hope it's not true, because what we hope in the solar, is that the requirement for renewable energy will be going up, so the REC market will stay robust, RECs will stay high value. In fact, we are conservative again in that we assume in these models and the rates here a REC price of $10. And if I'm not mistaken, Dan, the current market RECs, people are selling, the RECs are selling in the REC market now for 30, over 30. So, but again, that is a market.
There's not regulatory or legal or policy action that makes them go away like there is with the investment tax credit. This is this is your estimate, not something that's a sunset that's out there that's already known.
Right, that's our estimate.
Okay.
Right, the RECs are a creation of the requirement called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, and we believe there's a 10-year horizon on that in its existence at this point. So we're assuming only for 10 years.
Can you talk about the maintenance of the array? Does that fall on the district? Is it part of the cost? Is it something you guys do because you've sold it to us? Talk to us about maintenance.
Great question. Yes, solar equipment, solar arrays are pretty robust. No moving parts in there. It's all electronics. But they do have some, it's a significant investment, and it's a lot of electronics. You want to have some maintenance, monitoring and maintenance associated with it. And we, again, assume that cost in all of our financial models, that cost being the cost to have a sort of basic level O&M, operation and maintenance contract with Revision Energy. So that cost, it's in the figures that are in front of you. I believe the year 1 cost is a little bit over $3,002. So that is a relatively small fraction of the value of the energy that the array is producing. And what that O&M entails is remote, 24/7 monitoring of the system. It's electronically connected. We have access, you'll have access to internet-based real-time monitoring of its function. The equipment is set up with, alarms to raise an alert if production drops off, something's wrong with the system. Operation and maintenance is always the function of whoever owns the system. So under the PPA, you would not be responsible for that. That's a responsibility of the owner. And of course, the owner is recouping his investment by selling you electricity that the array produces. So the owner is, your interests are completely aligned for him to keep that thing working, producing all the electricity that it can for you. If you exercise the buyout option, then O&M, that cost would become your responsibility. But Revision Energy would always be there to stand behind, take care of the system that we built and have been monitoring so far and maintaining. I should say maintenance includes an annual visit to physically go and inspect, check all connections and functions. I should say in here now the equipment has, of course, manufacturer's warranties that Revision Energy Services stands behind. Panels are warranted for 25 years of production, guaranteed level of production. Inverters carry the inverters, which are the boxes that convert the DC, direct current electricity, to AC, critical piece of the system. Those carry 12-year warranties, are expected to last 20 years. And the replacement cost of those inverters at year 20 is also built into the models. You can pick that out of one of the columns. Cumulative revenue might even be up top. It's not a huge cost to replace the inverters, but again, it's built in to the models. All the revenue and projections and everything. So, yeah, if you own the array, then you would hopefully, or probably want
Does
to.
the O&M cost
For O&M?
escalate if we own it, or is it a relatively modest cost that you just described
Well, it's
as we go forward in time?
Yeah, it doesn't escalate any more than it would to the owner, the investor owner. Starts out at $3,000. I think the cost escalates at 2% or 2.5% a year. So that same rate would apply, to you as to the investor owner. We wouldn't take advantage of you. O&M escalator, 2% built in.
Yeah. When you talked about some of the other large projects, similar scale, public mostly, I guess all public projects, what financing mechanism did they choose? Are any of those turnkey? Are they all PPA?
Almost all. It's the rare public sector or nonprofit that uses turnkey. Dan, can you think of any?
Yeah, third party.
Okay.
The nonprofit, any nonprofit, like we may have a handful in our whole history that would purchase turnkey, and that often the only reason would be that they had a donor that, just put up the capital, and that donor probably was able to take tax advantages. But
Yeah. How about the year 6 buyout?
yes, we've had 8. It's a list of 8 that we've gotten to that point where it's year
Right.
6 or beyond. And I do have that list of institutions that have exercised the buyout. They're all, I think, but one in Maine. I don't have it in Maine.
8 have exercised the buyout, or 8 is the,
Have exercised the
and how
buyout.
many have not? Is that?
Oh, we have like 100.
Oh, so most of them are not. Most of them are.
Most of them haven't reached that maturity yet.
Okay.
So Revision Energy has really probably not pioneered, but by far been the purveyor of most of the PPAs in the region. We've really developed that vehicle, and that's kind of really started 2014, 15. I'm looking at Dan because he's co-founder of the company in New Hampshire, and
2018 was one of the first years. There was 9 eligible, 8 bought out.
So most of them are, that's what I'm trying to get to. Yeah, is most of them are buying out.
Town of Durham being one, which
Yeah.
is now going near 8, so they have not bought it out. We actually missed the budget cycle last year. Stayed ahead of it this year, and hopefully it's in the budget.
Is that a one-time offer for the buyout, or is it there's a continuing,
Continuing.
depreciation of that buyout price? Right, okay.
Yep, that's in the schedule. There's an even bigger version of this, schedule that goes way out here with, and that buyout price is one column,
Okay.
depreciates over time.
So Dan, that's a good question. So, Sue and I are not likely to be here when this thing matures at 6 years. Al and Michael may or may not be, depending on how crazy they are. So does revision come in and remind future boards and superintendents and business managers that you're at that point in time?
We do. I mean, case in point, I'm working with the Durham community right now. They have to decide whether they're going to recommend this or not. But I've joined them next week for a while.
I just think that milestone is an important and big deal for future boards, superintendents to be aware of, and I'm glad that you guys do that because it's really an important piece of this project.
Do you know if anybody has bonded that buyout?
Good question. Durham's looking at it.
Are they? Okay, yeah. Because that's a way to make that a very affordable transaction.
Yeah, the good thing about that buyout point, or a good thing about it is when you're doing a financial analysis in year 5, say, you'll actually have close to 5 years of real numbers. Here's how many kilowatt hours it's produced. Here's what they were worth. You'll have current utility rate to work with, and of course the hard buyout price. You'll be able to do, and even if you do analysis of the building's data, interval data, you can even get a better idea of how much is actually being net metered. And so you have an even more solid financial model. A future board will have an even more solid financial model in which to make that decision, on the bond rate, and, does it make sense to?
Yeah.
So one of the slides you were talking about taking delivery of the product, and if we didn't want to build the structure, the solar arrays in the parking area until the summer of '22, we'd still, in order to take advantage of the 26% incentive for investors, we still would want to enter into the agreement so that you could take 10% of the product. Do you store that on site? Is that part of the deal?
Well, revision would store it.
Okay, all right. And is that storage, does that cost us, or is that part of your model?
That's part of our model.
Dan's looking like he's saying, too late, buddy, you already said it.
I mean, it does cost us the whole material.
Yeah, I assume so. That's why I was asking
If
the
we push it
question.
out another year, there's no generation. The investor, they've
Right.
been holding, they committed, they put deposit money down. So that is definitely something that needs to be discussed.
Would you break it into 2 parts then? I mean,
That's what I was actually, that's
good part,
not,
I think-
that's not, my issue isn't the PPA with revision. My issue is the building of the port, the overhang. And I wanted to get into that discussion with both of you tonight as well, because it does play into, this discussion. And I've had, a very brief discussion this afternoon with Michael, but not in any depth, because we were doing the agenda together. So the issue of the bus port, if we call it that, the solar bus port, is that that's not part of the PPA at this point, though I think Michael's going to ask this question. The cost at this point is estimated to be how much, Andre?
352, 850.
352. And that's 352,000.
No, my question was, and that's not in the bond for the middle
Correct.
school, right?
Correct. That's always been outside of the bond. So so there's lots of different ways at the board's disposal to think about how we would cover the cost of the solar structure. So my first question goes to Ron, and you had an estimate from the power company that we would be eligible for a minimum of $150,000?
Right, so they, a maximum, I think.
Maximum.
Yep, so they cap,
I
so
like the
right
other one
now,
better. Yeah, I did too.
both Unitil and Eversource have been working with us since last summer, actually. And they're right now confirming our energy model. And they're going to provide, because you're building such a green building, they have offered to provide a certain cost per BTU saved per year.
Is that like the performance incentives that we got from Siemens when we did like energy stuff?
we're eligible for a different-
They had a buyback kind of thing.
Yep, now, the problem is your building's going to be saving so much energy that they have to cap that.
Okay.
And so I believe that their cap is $150,000.
And do we, when would we receive that? Is that going to be like a check that comes in the mail like it was with Siemens?
Yep.
And when would you envision us getting that, Ron, in this project?
So most of the time, you get it at substantial completion. So when the building's substantially
So we're
complete.
talking
so that'd be
about February of 22?
2022.
All right. So the reason I bring that up, Al, is because that's a source of income that we would have to declare if we wanted to use it under anticipated revenues.
So the conundrum you face is that there's a lag for the carport being, or the bus port, or whatever the heck we're calling it, being done, and we don't necessarily have the money right now to do it.
So I have other ideas. I just wanted to float with you and Michael, and I'll get all of this down in writing, for Wednesday's meeting, but this is really just brainstorming, okay? So, of course, we have our emergency fund. So as to say we're 200,000 roughly shy of paying for the solar bus port, the structure. We could do emergency fund and budget. We could split the cost over two budgets. We're looking at approximately 100,000 if we get the money from the power company. We could use emergency only. We could declare, and you help me through this, make sure I get this right, because you will slap my hand later if I don't. Declaring some part of the contingency as a resource.
The emergency fund.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, through the emergency fund. So there's several ways that the board can get to the place of covering the cost of the structure. And the reason I was asking timing is because we're entering budget season as well, as Dan knows. And so we have to be able to anticipate how we'll proceed in paying for that structure, so Andre knows when to build that structure, so Revision knows when to put in the solar array. So there's like three pieces we have to figure out together with the school board in order to make sure the structure exists for Revision to put the solar panels on.
Well, I mean, to me, I knew we were always going to go back and relook at our 5-year CIP, and we were always in the process of prioritizing projects. Clearly, to me, this would move to the top of the priority, because you can't have, if you don't have the structure, you can't do the solar. And so, I mean, I think we'll have to begin to look at like the CIP that's supposed to come forward. And again, this would move forward and others may fall off the list.
What fraction of the project is dependent on that? That only affects the parking lot portion, right? So what fraction of the overall, what fraction of the 600?
So 55% of the solar is on the bus port.
It's substantial.
Right.
Yeah, excuse me, it's substantial, like our.
Oh, yeah, it's more than half. Yeah, more than half of your capacity.
It is, but it's a matter of timing with Revision, because if they can attack the rooftop while we're constructing the bus port, then you're meeting your timeline with your investors. So That's what I'm trying to do, Dan, is trying to coordinate all of this with
Yep.
our finances. So,
Yep.
Yeah, we
you know,
would
it
want
all
to,
works according to the PPA, if that's the direction the board chooses.
You need
What I-
to start doing that carport, the port, earliest.
Well, so the roof should be available for the summer of 2021 for an installation. This is the roof of the main school.
Yeah.
okay.
It's possible for us to construct that carport at the same time, so if we know that it's a go, then all the materials can be ready, and that can be going up in that period of time when you're putting the rooftops on the school itself.
Okay. I'd
And
like
that, I
to,
think, would be the ideal situation based on trying to get the full advantage of the 26%.
yeah, to the
Yeah.
extent, well, I would like to say first that I think safe harboring and construction are somewhat separate. We can safe harbor the entire project by putting, by having the signed, we need the signed PPA for the full amount. And the investor would then put 10% down, and we procure 10% of equipment. But then, according to a construction timeline, we wouldn't have to procure the rest of the panels until such time as we know they're going to be installed. If it had to be, in 2 phases, it could be in 2. I would say that it's probably closer, more ideal if they're both constructed relatively close to each other, because we're involving merging 2 large arrays electrically, in banks of inverters, and then to the building transformer, and then EverSource it would probably be much more ideal if they were done at the same time, but it wouldn't have to be. Dan, is that?
With a single PPA, we could not operate the array
Till it's complete, right?
we cannot operate one, we cannot turn on one, the rooftop of the school, not have the bus port, they have to be turned on at the same time. Per the, per IRS rules, investor to capture that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, really? No pressure.
Right, because October 1st, you don't have,
Okay.
just enough on.
So say that again. So you can't roll the 352 into the project cost for the PPA that would be eligible for the investment tax credit?
No, the only thing available for the tax credit is solar equipment. So
The actual
unfortunately, structures, roofs don't count as solar equipment. They're what's known as, well,
Is that different than the residential tax credit?
no, I don't believe so. I mean, it's always a line I think people walk with,
What's basis eligible? Is the
Basis.
bus port built
cost basis.
solar and only solar, or is it serving other purposes?
We wouldn't build it if we weren't putting solar on it, so it's pretty well dedicated.
Yeah, so we would need to get the investor would need to be comfortable with that in order to make, sign a basis eligible percentage on that construction cost. So technically, could you roll it in? Sure, what's going to happen is the PPA rate will
Go up.
go up to recoup that cost.
Yeah, but there's a $91,000 worth of tax credit that's going to make,
If the investor is comfortable.
right.
Dan, is that something that you can investigate, or is that just, in order for us to kind of put all our ducks in a row, we need to know whether that's a viable option or not? Is that something that you can investigate?
I feel, that's a huge additional burden for that half of the project.
It might, I don't know if I could jump in here and point out, though, that the numbers, of course, you have in front of you, 25-year savings from the entire project are over $1 million. So if the bus port is 55% of the solar, then you can say that, 600,000 of that, or between 550 and 600 is attributable to having the bus port. So if you were to think bond the bus port over 20 years, the solar would pay for it. Right, if the capital cost is 350.
I don't think I want to go out for another bond this year.
Yeah.
But if you thought of it that way, or the solar you're putting on it more than pays for it.
So can I back up? So what you were saying, Sue, at the meeting next Wednesday, we have to approve this? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you need a signed PPA by October 1st.
Your first meeting in,
October is October 7th.
Okay.
to make a big deal difference, Dan, 1st or the 7th? Because the board likes to process things a little bit. They don't like to be kind of like backed into a corner, and
sure.
if we push them, we may just get a delay anyway, and
Well, I mean, I'm more than willing, like, you know, again, if October 1st was a hard deadline, then depending on what everybody thinks, that we theoretically would have to schedule another board meeting.
Yeah.
Or can we do it on the 7th?
Can we do it on the 7th, Dan?
It's not that hard. No, it's not that hard of a deadline. We could
That's what I would
handle it
prefer.
another week.
Yeah, we just need time to finalize and lock in an investor and safe harbor.
I mean, we're slow, but I cannot imagine that we wouldn't be done by October 7th. The only thing that always gives me pause is people are going to get this at first blush Wednesday, and they tend to be pretty conservative, so.
No, we'd never want to be rushing any board on a big decision like this. So no, 7th of
Now,
October would be fine.
I don't remember if we have had a public hearing in Durham over this, but I you know, yeah. No,
we wouldn't
please,
do
no.
it on a PPA. I mean, it's no different than what we did with Sand. We didn't have a public hearing. We did? It must have been one of those open.
At the same time as the meeting, though.
Oh, yes.
Before the meeting,
okay.
we just opened it up. Do you remember?
Sure.
I mean, in theory, if we're going to do that, what you would do is do the presentation Wednesday and then open a public hearing after the presentation and then close the public hearing.
You did that with Siemens, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. I mean, it seemed, honestly, I don't think
I
that,
wouldn't argue with you if you remember it.
I know it's always the better part of discretion, but since it is COVID, I don't think we're going to really get anybody to come here. I think, you know, rather than having a public hearing, as long as the information had come out next week and you had a space of time for people to react to it, that in my mind fills the public hearing.
We have a copy of your presentation to put on our website.
Oh, absolutely. Yep, I have it here. I
Awesome.
can leave it with your tech man, and he can upload it.
I think that would be great, because then people can review it if they have questions. Like
Yep.
the Energy Committee in Durham has been very active in
Yep.
conversations with us about how we've been working through our sustainability issues, and this would be something that would be super interesting to the sustainability committees in each of the towns.
Yeah, I also have PDF versions of the 4 handouts you've gotten, so I can give them those. People can.
So the way I'm looking at this right now is the construction cost of the roof supports adds about 4 years to the payback period on the project. And so if that can be financed and is eligible for the investment tax credit, that takes a year off of that. So that's a big deal.
That is a big deal. I think it's fair to say, though, it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big question whether a structure that's being built that has a use, definitely has a use, you know, cover the buses from covered parking structure, whether an investor would be comfortable, you know, even if you got a legal opinion that said, oh, the IRS will consider this solar equipment, there's a risk that the investor goes and files his taxes and the IRS says, well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Well, I think we have that. I think that Michael's right, though. We wouldn't be building this structure if it wouldn't serve a purpose for solar.
Okay.
There's no
good.
question. I mean, this would be $360,000 we could save.
And good
by
to have
not-
on the record.
Yeah.
You wouldn't build it. if
Yeah,
it weren't.
so I think, you know,
holding
if
solar.
Dan's willing to carry that water for us and investigate it and give us a definitive answer, that will help the board make an informed decision.
We would love to get such a determination, actually. I mean, we would love to build more of these for other towns, you know?
Yeah.
If covered parking structures could be considered solar equipment, we,
Well, I mean, one example is if we don't put the solar on it, it's not getting built. It's not part of the bond. So it
Right,
wasn't
it's not part of the
school
bond.
Project bond.
Right.
So, you know, if anybody questioned, you know, the process here, the process is, yeah, we need to get more money for the project because it's not part of the project, so it's part of the solar project.
It is not an essential part of the middle school
Right, I
project
mean,
otherwise.
it's a documented fact that it's not part of the, part of the school bond.
Dan, how long
Good.
do you think it would take you to get that answer? I mean, do you think we'd have that answer by Wednesday?
Next week,
Yeah.
I can give you, it's a good question. What type of answer?
Whether it's possible.
I'm not sure. We can't get a ruling, so it's basically going to have to come from my legal. That's probably the best I can get you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be helpful. You know, if your legal says not possible, then at least we can take it off the table.
Well, I think the question is really, are you willing to write that into the contract? You know, that we're going to vote on October 7th or whatever day it is. Yeah, that's really the question. What, that's your legal or whatever, that's.
You know, I would anticipate, you know, common sense would prevail 6 years from now, and people would say, buy this puppy out, because the amount of money you're going to save is astronomical compared to riding it through its 25 years. And as a constituent, Dan, I'm sure that you'd be willing to say that from the microphone. Buy it out.
I will, but I'm obviously slightly biased,
Yeah.
so I recognize that.
Have your wife do it.
Well, I think, you know, like Ned said, I think at that point, we're going to have performance data. We would have,
Yeah.
you know, I think that'll be a fairly easy, objective, is this a financial benefit or not decision. I guess, you know, another way to look at this whole thing about the additional structural support is if we didn't do the buyout, that will come pretty close to wiping out all the savings. Yeah.
if you don't exercise the buyout, you continue to accrue savings at a fairly modest rate. You still get 200 and,
Yeah, but you've got to start with another $352,000 negative,
I
and
see,
you've got
yeah,
and you've got the cost of money
right,
on
you
that.
built,
So
right,
you're-
you built the busport, and now you're, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
And would we, in knowing that we're going to get the $150,000 from utility company, we're $202,000 short?
Is that $150,000 contingent on us doing the solar project?
No.
Then that shouldn't be part of the equation. That's fungible money that should not be,
Okay.
I mean, yes, if it comes down to how do we pay for it, that's a source, but whether it's a smart investment or not, that shouldn't be part of the equation. Yeah, okay.
So, any other questions for these guys while we have them captive?
No, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, this is,
And we'll see you Wednesday.
You will? Right here.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Andre before they check out?
Is there any other, did you look at other spaces that could take structure, like this looks like it's just the bus loop, right? The parking lot that's near the bus loop wouldn't be a good spot to,
So, it depends on how much you want to generate. So there's two
Right.
factors going
Yeah.
into this. So the first factor is, if you go above, Ned, correct me if I'm wrong here, or
Yeah.
Dan. If you go above 500 kW of AC, then regulations change. Like, you have to do some things every year as an owner of a power source that generates more than 500 kW of AC per year. Is that right?
Well, right, we're at 483, I think it is, 473 kilowatts
Yeah.
AC right now, and the 500 kilowatts AC is a threshold at which Ron's saying there's some regulatory things that come in. There's also a significant capital expense that comes in. The utility will require you to install something called a recloser, which is like, in my understanding, a giant circuit breaker, that you have such a large generation asset now connecting to the grid that you have to put this additional piece of equipment in. It costs about $100,000. So comes in as a big cost if you just exceed that threshold by even a little bit. So we're right up there.
Yep, so we did.
Don't really want to exceed that.
We need to stay below 500 kilowatts AC.
AC.
500 AC.
Yeah. So that was so we are, we said this would be a net zero ready building. And we did finish the energy model, and we can generate 684,554 kilowatt hours per year with the solar, and we're at 694,000 of what we need for the building.
Okay.
So we're right there. And what we were just talking about was, this is all based on a panel that generates 440.
Well, it's a 440 watt panel.
So, can we bump this up just a little bit to get to the 694 between the bus port and the roof of the school is the question, because I think we do want to stay below the 500. And we also want to take a look at our schedules, because the energy model is predicted on the use of the building, and we do have, the building being used 50% of the capacity of the building for 50% of the time throughout the entire summer. And so, that's something that we're being conservative in the energy model, just as they're being conservative in their costs of this. So when the utility company gets that and we are able to take a look at this, I'm still hoping to negotiate with Eversource.
Right, okay.
And just say, that we're pretty much on an annual basis generating almost the same amount of power that we're taking, and consider that power includes your natural gas. So that load on the building is not only, it's 100% covering your electrical load, it's also picking up the load of your natural gas, because every BTU of gas requires 3 times the replacement using electricity, right? It's a 3-to-1 as opposed to a 1-to-1.
I'd like to see the energy model.
Yeah.
That actually calls into question the assumption about how much we consume behind the meter.
What's that?
That calls into question the assumption about how much we consume behind the meter, I think.
Right. And you're never going to know that until we get the actual energy bills from the use of the building.
Yeah.
Because as green as we design a building, you could crank up the AC, you could, crank up the heat, you can't open the windows, but, you can do lots of other things to increase the energy that you're using in the building. The energy model.
We're doing that right now with our schoolhouses by increasing the ventilation.
Yep.
Exactly, yeah. And so what we're operating right now, we had predicted 818 kilowatt hours, 818,000, and we're at 694. So.
Wait, you predicted 818 for what?
Back when we started.
Oh, right, okay.
Before we got all.
When you were at concept.
Right,
Yeah.
everything in terms of the envelope
Right.
and such.
That reminds me though, you had a drawing up there that showed a couple hundred square feet of the roof reserved for thermal.
Yes.
Is that part of the existing project?
Yep.
Okay, so that's a totally different conversation.
And
That's already done.
That solar's part of the job.
Part of
Okay.
the model,
Yeah.
right?
You're just building around that. That's part of your envelope. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
we're building around it, right.
Because we are using natural gas to heat hot water in the building and to run the kitchen equipment.
So you're
And
preheating
so-
it with the,
Yeah, and so what this solar collector does is it preheats the water before you need to bump it up with the natural gas. And so the typical savings are between 50 and 60% of your energy use for domestic hot water in the building by using this type of solar collector.
So you're minimizing the amount of natural gas
Yeah.
you'll
Right.
use because you're preheating it with
Yep.
solar.
I'm
In New
surprised
Hampshire,
it's such a small footprint for that part.
It is, yeah, you don't need a lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're actually running the actual water through the collector, and then it goes into your boiler. So the temperature, so it's preheating.
You're not using glycol, it's a direct
Nope.
water. It's a
Nope. Nope. So,
I'm out of questions.
What? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
thank you.
Wow.
I sent you a spreadsheet from back in 19.
Oh, on
I
the,
had the solar panel in
Okay.
one of them, but I'll have her update it.
all right.
All right, I think that was, so I don't know whether so I put I think we're at a point now, we're mid-September, that we should be coming back with some kind of budget goal to the school board. I mean, that was kind of what we laid out for the process. And so I sent this out, and actually, Brian, who's not here, sent me a response, but the way I worded it, and I put the numbers in. I'm trying to be the least amount of squishy as I can. So I said the 21-22 school budget goal will include three options, 2.5%, and I put the actual number. I asked Sue about last year's budget, which was $47,326,181, and that does not include the food service right and what else?
Federal funds.
Federal funds. So if you did 2.5% of that, that's $1,183,155,000. 3% is $1,419,785, and 3.5% is $1,656,416. So those are the increases over the fiscal 2021 budget. I added in, although this could be changed, I said the total increases will include Fund 10, that already does, and that was what the 47,326,181 was. 21, I think, is the food service, and 22, 23 is the grants, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And all warrant articles that we put forward, I can only imagine the only warrant article we're putting forward is going to be or pass, right?
No, there's two of them.
The state changed the law on how much money we can carry forward.
Okay.
5%, so we want to have that.
Okay, but again, that's not a
money.
cost. That's not a cost to us. I'm just talking about warrant articles that cost us money. And then I added in there the caveat, which I think will be probably a robust discussion, is the revenue from the reserve accounts can be used to offset the expenses. Thoughts?
I think that sounds reasonable. I mean, I guess my preference would be for the goal to be all in, including food service and including expenditures from grants.
So would you, which is, I agree. So the question then would be, from last year, would you include what Sue was throwing in there? There was the teacher's contract and is that separate?
No, that's in there.
That's in
a
there.
warrant. That was a warrant article.
Okay. So I just like this because it's very concrete. It's like, there's a separate conversation I know we're going to have. And the separate conversation is the tax one, which really rests on what percentage of the apportionment you get and what you're getting from the state. And it's like, there's no way we can avoid that conversation. But I think let's start with this and control what we can control. I think come late November, we're going to come up with what is the actual.
Right, we kind of separate those two conversations.
Yep.
This lets us start with what does the budget need to be?
Yep.
And then as we start to get more information about what is adequacy going to look like, then we can decide how much we need to rely on reserve accounts.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And it's very possible we won't know what adequacy is going to be into the winter months.
We're supposed to get an estimate by the 15th. I think it's part of the RSA. Right.
That estimate is really something that's written on the back of a napkin
Yeah.
based on past. This is election year, and
Yeah.
I suspect that the legislature won't be acting on adequacy till well into the session. So I think we'll always be playing with this estimate that comes out from the state very shortly, but it's sort of like projecting the tax increases. It's okay to work with, but it's not going to be accurate.
Yeah, again, I think we'll come back and have a conversation with the taxes later.
I thought this was the second year of the biennium.
Well,
I know they can always go
Yes.
and mess with things, but you don't usually get quite as much budget action. So, and if it helps to clarify in here that this includes all warrant articles that are recommended by the board, I mean, that would clarify that, anything that happens.
Yeah, that's what Brian's.
Right. And we won't know if there are any petitioned articles or there are any changes made to the budget at the deliberative session. We won't know that till well after the board has delivered the proposed budget. So, I think it's reasonable to base the expenses on all of our board proposed warrant articles.
I think that's what we were always, I remember people yelling at us about the budget goal with some regularity, but I think this covers everything. And I thank you for the addition of the recommended by the board, because that does take care of his concern.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we always have if we do have a shortfall in revenue, then that does create a tax impact that we can't fully anticipate, unfortunately.
So when I look at that, then I think when you look at the budget meeting, then it's really going to be, and I'm not precluding, I know Denise likes the overall story, and we can certainly put that in the budget book, the overall story, but I see like at the main thing that'll happen at the budget workshop is what is the difference between these three models and what can you live with? And I mean, it very well could be that you come up with something that is not one of these, I mean, is not exactly 3 or not 3.5. I don't know what it'll be, but I think then people will begin to look down what you're adding and subtracting and think of what they can live with.
Right, and that difference is going to be $500,000 or so.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, though, if it gets down to like.
Well, the difference is $500,000, but how you get there may involve other parts of the budget that are not that.
I think that there would
Yeah.
probably be a robust conversation going around, also the use of the funds and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right.
So if this is good, then we can, is there a time built into next week's
This would be it could
board
be on the
meeting?
agenda,
We can
yeah.
talk about it?
so if you could send that to Wendy, we'll send that out with the packet.
Perfect.
And she's also going to send the draft budget schedule, because you usually vote on those dates, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
So that does include food service and
Yes.
pass-through grants?
I
can't
said
remember what
the
fund numbers
total
are.
increases will include Fund 10, Fund 21, Fund 22, and 23, and all warrant articles recommended by the board.
And 22 and 23 are the
That's the
grants?
grants.
Okay, yeah. All right. Wendy or Sue mentioned the calendar.
Yeah, we just usually have the board vote on this schedule, just so we can lock those dates.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we saw a draft of that a few meetings ago.
think
The thing that's not on there that I don't know if we want to consider or not is when we had the cooperative meeting with the towns, we talked about getting together around the end of November, start of December, before the budget is finalized, once we have a lot more of the revenue and the external drivers understood. And I don't know if we want to try to put that on there, or that's really something we have to negotiate with the towns anyhow and see
Yep.
what works.
Well, that would
So-
be with this committee, though, right?
That would, I assume so, yeah,
That's true.
as opposed to a full
I'm just
board
wondering
meeting.
if the
yeah.
end of November, beginning of December is too late, Michael. Because we'll have our budget workshop, and we'll have the debate on where we think we can land based on the drivers.
Right.
I wonder if we should bring them in
it's a trade-off of when we have guaranteed maximum insurance and when we have
Right.
the initial adequacy estimate.
They're going to want to know
November
what the
15th
tax.
is adequacy,
15th of,
November.
yeah. So I don't know, I don't think it's worth doing it before the 15th of November because
They're going to want to know the tax impact.
that's, right, and that's what's going to drive
Totally
that.
want to know the tax impact.
Yeah. Now, one thing I can tell you is I saw the equalized valuation numbers recently, and they didn't change very much. So that's not going to drive a big town-to-town shift.
1819 one?
Yeah,
It's 1819,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
yeah, that's the most recent one.
Yeah. Not sure if that's what they're using for apportionment. No, it is. It is. It's 2 years out, yeah.
We don't have the residency, the enrollment numbers
We
yet.
don't, yeah, we don't know. That.
You might have them. I don't,
Well,
the DOE hasn't published them
enrollment
yet.
numbers, they are using, let me think. They're
1 year
using-
removed,
They're
yeah.
using a year back, so we're using last year's enrollment numbers. ADM? ADM we have both of those figures. What we don't have is the assessed value of the communities, the MS1.
Right,
That's what we don't have.
yeah.
Okay.
But the apportionment formula, we have those numbers, but we just don't have the assessed value of the towns.
Right. And I'm not so worried about knowing the assessed value of the towns if we're looking at how much the apportionment, how much a portion to each town has to be raised by taxes
Yep.
That's
is
on
really
your sheet.
what I care about.
I think you have the updated on that sheet that I gave you. That is the
Okay.
update.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, I think-
percentage, you want to know what that percentage is? That's on there, I believe that.
Okay,
Because
great.
I would have done that, because I had that.
And that was from one of our June meetings, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
I think I sent it again to you today, right?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I mean, again, what we're really looking for is what is each town picking up in a change in the
Yep.
apportionment?
that helps.
That's the big thing. It's like,
And usually they all do, pretty much.
Yeah,
But
all right. And then the last thing that's budget driving that was on next week's agenda for the full board, I think, is the retirement incentive. And will there be estimated savings numbers that go along with these for that meeting?
Well, I would, if you would ask me that, I would guess it would be probably right around $500,000 looking at this. Because there'll be a couple of positions that I won't recommend filling.
Right,
And
okay.
then, of course, then you're looking at the differential between what somebody's making at the top and where we bring somebody in. And the unknown is health insurance, but
Right.
Tim just ran some numbers today on health insurance, and we actually had a pretty significant decrease in cost. So a lot of people took a lot of the new staff took the new plan that we negotiated.
did they really?
Yeah, about 8 veteran staff, but almost, Teresa was saying this to me, she says almost everyone who saw the difference between the new plan that we adopted and the older plans, they went right to the less costly plan. So I think that's going to help us, because that's only going to grow.
Yeah. Plus, those new plans really give like you a pause, you know what I mean? Because of the deductible to,
Well, and new people wouldn't be familiar with anything else, so
yeah.
they're going to have to, wouldn't say, oh, that isn't what I had before.
Yeah,
They didn't have it, so.
for sure. So just in terms of, being in this conversation, so, I think that based on what we're seeing in kindergarten and what we're seeing in fourth grade, that we could reduce a couple positions at the elementary next year. And so, you assume that's probably worth $250,000 between being top of the scale and insurance, and retirement now is so, such a substantial chunk. Sue and I were talking about it a couple months ago, and it kind of comes out to be about 25% of somebody's salary now with FICA and retirement and so forth. So I think there's some significant savings there. I do want to point out that we had a couple of people come in from outside the Teachers Guild who are age eligible. So there were a couple of people that I included just because they fit the goal of trying to save money in the replacement.
And so is that like Wednesday we'll approve these? Is that what we're supposed to do?
So this one, I think, Michael asked me this question this afternoon. I think we've been talking about this one for months.
Yeah.
And I think this should be, the conversation that we always have about are we losing, incredible people? And as Michael saw it for the first time, he went, whoa.
Yeah.
Because there are some whoas on this list. There are
Yeah.
some people that I didn't anticipate putting in, and they're incredible educators, and they'll be hard to replace. But that was the whole goal, is to try to make this transition and attract people into retirement, and I think it certainly did that.
Yeah, no, in my mind, I think this is totally different because we have talked about this ad nauseum. So it's like, the list will always give people pause. Every time we've done it, there's always somebody there that you recognize, but
This is almost as big a list as we did in the second year I was here. This attracted a lot of people. It definitely will reduce our ongoing cost in personnel, probably in health insurance as well. And I think a $500,000 estimate is not way off, Michael. Maybe I'm off one way or the other, but it won't be much.
I think that'll be a number the board will want to hear next week, where, if you think about that a little bit. But yeah.
And so like I always do, we keep a careful track, so over the course of replacing people, I'll keep the record and we'll see how close my estimate is. But I think it's a good solid estimate based on our experiences.
Yeah.
it's so depressing with the retirement thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
we really
you
were
work so hard to put together this, and like in that quickly, it's kind of wiped out.
Now, Tim did the estimate on health insurance. Has he completed the actual cost of, when we were building the budget last time, we estimated that the teacher cost was going to be someplace in $720,000.
No, I didn't ask him that one.
Do you think we could push him to have that number ready for finance? Because that would be, if there's a savings there, that would be on top of.
So that's impact, essentially that's a change to what we had projected in last year's warrant article?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
because
Yeah.
In
So let-
theory, it should be less, but we'll see. It could be close, could be
Yeah.
right on. I wouldn't imagine it would be any higher because.
I don't know that we need that number to be refined until we start to have the rest of the expense portion of the budget
Okay.
coming together. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do with that if,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't, at this point.
So you don't
So
want to ask-
we don't have to push, just,
Okay.
yeah, we'll
Yeah,
need it
yeah.
at some point, but
Yeah.
not, doesn't have to be a yesterday piece. So Alan, Michael, when we come around to the next meeting, which would be,
I think we have a choice.
We
yeah,
have a-
be after this meeting, right? We have one meeting between
30th?
Well, there's,
30th.
23rd or the
I
30th?
think, yeah, there's 2
There's 2 weeks
weeks
between meetings.
between the next board meetings.
Right, so when would you like to have the next finance committee meeting, the 23rd or the 30th? And then what would you like in front of you for that meeting?
Both are good questions. I think I'd prefer the 30th, because I have.
I just saw Sue go.
Well, I'd rather give you as much time as possible.
Because we're still building the models.
Right.
Yeah.
So whatever time you can give us to do that is gratefully
Yeah.
appreciated. Is the 30th okay, Michael? for you?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
And then I think that what we should come in with is the 3 models.
Yep.
To the best of our ability. We can construct, our drivers,
Yep.
which is actually why I wanted that number, Michael, because I would need that
okay.
to do the drivers.
Sure, yeah.
So we can articulate our drivers, now that we have retirement. We're going to estimate 10% on health insurance until we know better.
Yep.
That's what we have in there.
We'll have our personnel costs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to bake this into the drivers? Do you want me to do an estimate where I subtract it after the drivers? How would you
The
like to see
retirement thing you're
this?
talking about?
I think it would be helpful to see it show up there.
Take it
as a separate line.
As a separate line,
I mean-
yeah, okay.
What are you saying?
The retirement incentive, Michael asked what I expected that to save, I say $500,000. I want to make sure that we capture that as we're having our
Yep.
You're going to need it.
budget, yeah,
You're gonna-
desperately.
That's true.
After doing those numbers, you're going to need it,
Yeah.
so.
Sue, is there anything you need from Michael and Al in terms of building a driver letter?
I don't think so. Do you want that letter for the board next week? Or is that, we talking about, I typically give that letter to the board.
Right, but we can run it through this committee on the
Oh,
30th and put it
okay.
on the board on the 7th.
Oh, okay, that's fine, that's,
This, one of the things that is still hard for you and I, Sue, and Michael didn't remind me of it directly, but he reminded me in the questions he was asking this afternoon is, we've got to remember that anything associated with the budget, we want to drive through the committee first before we get to the full board, so they have a
Okay.
chance to
okay, so the letter on the 30th, I can do that.
critique it.
See when we got the rates last year.
So then, Al, if in
Seventh.
your finance committee report, you can say out loud, we're going to
Yep.
investigate what these options look like. And, we're going to have Sue generate the driver letter, and then we'll bring all that to the full board on the 7th.
Well, again, since we're going to approve the budget goal, it kind of leads into the next thing that we're going to actually work on the 3 models.
I guess I'm kind of super sensitive to making sure the board knows what we're doing, so we don't
Yeah.
end up with
Oh, yeah.
we didn't know you were working on that.
No. I mean, again, I think it ties to, that's kind of really why I wanted to get the budget goal done. And that's actually why I wanted to kind of write it up beforehand, because it tends to be kind of painful wordsmithing it. I'm hoping that this makes it about as concrete as possible.
It seems pretty straightforward to me.
And then again, we're building towards getting the budget workshop.
The first payment on the second part of the middle school bond will be in this budget.
Yes.
What assumption do you plan to make for, I mean, that came in
That's
Right.
a question.
quite a bit light.
We have to talk about.
Yeah,
Or do you
Sue and
want
I
us-
have had that conversation as well, and, clearly, through the direction of the bond bank, they dramatically overestimate
Right.
what we need. And so the question that I had for her, I guess I would ask you guys, is I think we should go with what the actual number was, maybe rounded up to the nearest 100,000, if it was 350.
So we'd be talking 400?
Budgeted at 400, with the understanding if it does come in at 650 for some reason, we would have to turn to the emergency fund to cover it. Because I don't want to over budget that number.
Not by that much.
Because we desperately need to stay as true to
Right.
the actual numbers as we possibly can. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Sue, are you?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, as long as.
We
we're-
talked about it, but
We
we didn't
talked
come
about it.
to a closure on it. I was
Yeah.
talking
Yeah,
out
I'm
loud
okay
like
with
I am
that.
now.
Just as long as we're all understanding that there's a good chance it might not be that, but, yeah.
All right.
Anything else?
And, on the 30th, we can talk about what assumptions we're making too, make sure the 3 of you are on board with,
Yep.
our best guesstimates as we're going forward.
Yeah, yep. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
All right.
thank you very much.
Am I supposed to do something?
Is that a wrap?
We're done. I don't have a gavel here. It's like, I have to work virtually.
Hang your head against the table.
Feels like-